Hey sports fans, Coach Nick here, and welcome to B-Ball Breakdown, another great episode of Court Call. And what we're going to do with Ronnie this time is isolate just the series. So the first series up is OKC versus Memphis. Ronnie, these games have been just a little bit exciting, wouldn't you say?
They're great. You can't help but love this kind of basketball at this top level. And it shows the competition is everywhere. As you know, the competition was in the NCAA. The competition is strong here, even with the 1-8 teams. So basketball is prospering greatly. And
it's a very thin razor here between who's going to win and who's not. And the referees' calls become large. So let's break right into it. In Game 2, we had a kickball no call by Gasol. So we'll have to have a little interpretation of what the exact rule is for a kick and whether you thought this was a kickball in overtime toward the end of the game.
But remember, a kick has to be intentional, and it has to be deemed by the official that that act was intentional. And the manner in which Gasol gets that leg out, I think a whistle should have been whistled here, and basically that's about it. I tell you what, I didn't like the crash play. I think that should have been addressed too. I think the momentum of that play looked like an offensive foul. That would have helped. There's so much in officiating sometimes. Secondary issues come up and they give you a problem because you didn't handle the simple first one, and it kind of just becomes more organic and it just goes into something else. So now all of a sudden we got two plays that look shaky when we could have addressed the first one.
So you're thinking that the Kevin Durant drive should have been called a block or a charge?
I believe a charge on that play because the defender got in his position well enough time. And even though Durant did something that, I teach the players is if you get stuck in a spot on a block charge, go upward and try not to go through. And I think he gets it. I mean, he's very delicate on his moves and he knows what he's doing. But in this case, I think the physics of his body took the hit enough. Even though it might have been embellished somewhat, I think that play could have been an offensive foul.
Now, it didn't actually affect it negatively for the Thunder because they ended up getting a turnover and the ball back right away after that. So at least for that matter, for Thunder fans, you could feel a little bit okay about it because it ended up balancing out slightly.
Yeah, and that's good. That's what happens in basketball sometimes. That's why you can't blame different groups, Team A, Team B, or Team C out there. It does balance out.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to another play that was earlier in the game, late in the fourth quarter, where Zebo shoots the ball and then catches his own pass or his own shot. Is this a travel or is there a deflection? What do you think happened on this play?
Well, I have to tell you that on this play, if you really wanted to be technical, when he faces up and his right foot is the pivot, he actually goes left into the paint and he boldly, picks up that foot before the dribble leaves his hand. Now, having said that, this is not a point of emphasis, really, unless it's really, really bad. So I can see that being acceptable behavior right now until the officials and the leadership team begins to hone in on that. However, he does walk then. The second part of it is that when he goes for the shot, I don't know if it's deflected or not, but before he does that, he actually hops on his left foot. And that's where the travel is as he finishes that play into the paint. So now you question, well, if it's a deflection, he's certainly able to go get the ball. If it's not a deflection and he loses the ball, meaning the ball slips and the official believes it slipped out of his hand, then he is capable and legal to go and re-grasp that ball. So it's just not the fact that it's a ball that's in the air. If the ball slips out of a shooter's hand, he can go and recover that slip.
Absolutely. I feel like there should have been something blown on this whole thing. And here's the funny thing is the Thunder fans don't want that call because it turns into a dunk and the lead for Kevin Durant and for the Thunder. So it's ironically the Grizzlies would have benefited from the correct call here because it would have stopped play and given them a chance with a 1-point lead to at least defend the basket.
That's true. Anytime you can stop and get your feet grounded on what you want to do defensively, that's always an advantage. And that's why some coaches, obviously, even in my pre-days of thinking about it, is, if we can get the defense off from being, standardized on what they want to do, we got a better shot at our offense.
And so the Grizzlies ended up pulling that game out in a really exciting fashion in overtime. But let's move to our next play, which is Game 3 in the fourth quarter. And they're down by 4, the Thunder are, and Russ takes a 3. So the question is, does he stick his leg out in that new rule that we like to, we pointed out before, to attract enough contact on the shot to get the foul, which ends up being a foul on Russ? What do you think happened here on this play?
I have to tell you something. It is not in the feet. And even though he spreads his legs, his defender has gone past him. So he's trying to catch him, but he doesn't catch him with his feet. And what ends up happening is the timing of when his defender puts his hand up, and by the way, he does it vertically, the timing of when he puts his hand up catches Westbrook's elbow. Now, I don't know if the guys saw that part of the play. If they saw that part of the play, then they're correct in awarding a very subtle but foul on Westbrook's shot. Because when you put your hand up late and you meet the elbow late because you put it on, even though you put it up vertically, you've made contact with a player's elbow. And in that case, a very unusual time, with 99% of those situations on verticals arms, you're not going to get called for a foul. But this was a unique kind of embellishment. He embellished the play offensively. If you ask me, this has a flop piece to it. I don't know if the league office sees that, but there's an embellished flop here. But the contact is legit, and I'm glad the guys got it. What they actually saw, I don't know. All I know is that that play was a foul, and it was whistled.
And the other part of the 99% of this play is that normally a shooter would not make a shot in that position that Russ put himself in the air. So that is Russ being Russ, I suppose. A really impressive play. And it ended up getting them closer to winning the game, but ultimately not in Game 3. Again, another overtime thriller. But definitely, I think, a good call on that up top. Let's move on to Game 5 last night, because there's a couple of really interesting plays that we have. The first one is Kevin Durant shooting a free throw to tie the game, down by 1 with 27.5 seconds left. And out of the blue, Joey Crawford, your friend and mine, grabs the ball out of KD's hand. Talk to me about what possibly could be going through his mind and why he would even think about interrupting the free throw on this instance.
Well, you know, in all fairness to all referees, even though I think Joe Crawford in this case, he's always been an impulsive kind of official. He responds hard, he responds strong. And in this case, he's really dealing with the fact that he recognizes that the clock above and the information concerning fouls, especially concerning the bonus, is not properly indicated up there. Now, regardless of that fact, I don't think our officials think, not all of them, but the player officials, the guys that have played like myself, are aware of interrupting free throw continuity. And in this case, I don't think he needed to do that. Had he put that in his, in his profile of work, he probably wouldn't have done that, because it's not about the clock as much as it's about the scorer's table and the coaches that monitor team fouls. I had an incident one time where a coach had a take foul thinking that he had a penalty foul to give, and because he looked at the clock. So I understand that could happen, but you have to know when you want to do that. And you can't do that in between. Even though you have a wide range of parameters to work with as an official, you can do anything that you think is appropriate at that time, as long as it's within the rules. But if the elastic clause believes that he's got to change that clock, he can't do it in between free throws, because that free throw could arguably be one that, because he missed the second one, and anybody would have said, he disoriented him. And by the way, as you know, coaches call timeouts in between people's free throws to freeze guys. Old story amongst players and coaches, not so always, kind of absorbed and understood by officials.
Absolutely. I've had that at the high school level, too, on key free throws where they take a lot of extra time just kind of standing around and making the player think about it. But here's the thing that, by the way, you really couldn't expect Joey Crawford to sort of get to this point of his thinking. But if Durant misses the free throw for whatever reason, they foul to stop the clock because it's about the same amount of time on the shot clock. Then he's got all the time in the world to fix whatever they have up on the board. Now, I don't know in real time if he has enough time to process all that and think about it. It's probably asking too much, but certainly the realities of the situation was that, where there was absolutely no need to stop it there after he gave the ball to Durant.
Yeah, and I got a lesson learned in my own situation. I actually did something because the clock was misunderstood. And I was told by the office, it's an interesting play, Ronnie, but the bottom line is that clock, when it comes to team fouls, is not the responsibility it's the responsibility of the coaches on each side of the table to get the actual information right. It may be wrong on the clock, just like a score. It may be wrong on the clock, but if you don't stop that situation in the right time, you can't just stop a game to find out if the score is wrong, even at a critical time, unless you have an opportunity to stop the clock. And in this case, he interfered with the continuity. And like I said, I don't think he realizes that. And so it's a lesson learned. I hope they discuss this.
Yeah, it was crucial. Now let's move on to the end of the game where they had to review an out-of-bounds call. They had to figure out exactly who it went off of, which was very difficult to see. Now, the question a lot of people were asking, though, is the clock ran a few ticks longer than it needed to. We've talked about this before this season in a court call, but is it reasonable to expect that they should then, as soon as they see the ball touch the ground, go back and reset the clock to that exact time, or is there human reaction time involved?
The key is that when you have an opportunity to go to replay and to check out an out of bounds play, you certainly can check out the clock. And if a clock shows that it hits the chair or it hits the seating or it hits something out of bounds, that's the time the play is actually out of bounds. But in other situations, you gotta go by the fact that you think a 3/10 at best has come off the clock by a human reaction. Human reaction time is 2 to 3/10. So in that case, you wouldn't change it. But in a case where you could go look at it because 2 minutes or less in the game, you can always go look at an out of bounds play to confirm it. And by doing so, you can reset the clock actually to when it is. So I think in that case, they could have reset it.
So you think that they should have put on the correct time, which was, I believe, like 3.0, as opposed to what they ended up doing, which was just below that. And ironically, it does become up because Ibaka tips the ball in a hair late, and if they would have had that extra tenth of a second, which wouldn't have affected much, they would have won the game.
Well, that's true. And by the way, when that play does happen, you'll notice that the streaming of the clock on the bottom of our TV screen will show 0.2. But if you look at the clock on the basket, you'll recognize that the clock is 0-0. So here again, based on streaming, when you stop the Ibaka play, you will notice that some people might have thought the ball should have gone in and be counted because it said 0.2. But if you look at it on the game clock, which is the closest clock to the floor, that streaming says 0-0. So there's a case where you're playing with time, and that same situation occurs a lot of places in games. So I'm kind of satisfied with how they resulted, although I understand the technicality we're all referring to.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, no matter what happened, it's a great game and a great series, and the guys are making plays all over the place, which is really, the more important thing. And clearly we can go back through Game 5 and find lots of instances where OKC could have cleaned up one or two of those plays and would have won that game anyway. So it's not usually that one play that ends up deciding it, but certainly a great conversation to have and worthy of going through this. I can't wait to go through the other series. There's a lot of stuff happening. I hope you got your referee hat ready.
Yeah, it's going to be demanding. And by the way, the same demand that comes at me with questions that you are getting from our fans is the same pressure on me to get it right because, I can look them up and this and that. But on the court, remember, these guys have got to come together and get all of this stuff right then and there. And it's an exciting time. And their adrenaline is flowing, as you saw in the Joe Crawford situation. He wasn't looking to hurt the game. He was looking to help it. But there's a piece to that he has to recognize that is also part of basketball. And that just, no matter how good a referee you are, or in his case, especially his reputation, you're always learning something. And I hope this is brought out to him.
Absolutely. Great stuff. Can't wait to get to our next one. So stay tuned, sports fans. And don't forget, use that hashtag court call so we can find that submission on Twitter when you do submit it. And don't forget, at B-Ball Breakdown, we're not a channel, we're a conversation. You in?
I'm in, Coach. It's exciting.